Hey everyone, Lex here again. How you been? So lanterns are out. I mean, we've known this for a while now, but the most popular and potentially best offhand for Slayer fighters everywhere is no longer an option. So what's the best replacement? In this video, I test what is likely the best offhand option for Slayer fighters currently and what main hands they should be pairing it with, but also some interesting options with potential that you should consider playing around with, and as well as the stinkers you should avoid at all costs. How did I test these weapons, you ask? Well, really, I chose to measure their DPS. It's a DPS comparison. DPS is damage per second for the unaware. Most people know what DPS means these days, but in case you don't, it's basically the average damage dealt by a particular method or weapon over a certain period of time, obviously measured in seconds. All right, a few things to know about this testing methodology. So I felt it was appropriate to start the timer at the mouse click of all of these combos because, different weapons have different wind-up times for that first attack. I'm sure you all agree that the animation that has to play out after you hit the mouse button should count towards the DPS of a weapon. I mean, the initial wind-up animation is just the weapon's swing speed. That all counts towards a weapon's DPS. And I decided to stop the timer on the frame that the last bit of damage is dealt with a given weapon combo. Also, the timer in my software was counting up seconds by frame, so like the seconds are broken up into fractions of 60. So I had to do a little bit of conversion hijinks to get the right decimal to divide the total damage number by.
But trust me, they're legit.
On top of that, I used target dummy headshots only for consistency and bigger numbers, but just keep in mind that these numbers are representative of headshot damage on a naked target. Everything you're going to hit is going to have a little bit of armor, a little bit of damage mitigation, so the real numbers may vary a little bit, but the effectiveness of each weapon displayed here should relatively translate into those situations. Also, I didn't feel like it was useful to calculate like the true DPS of a weapon by just wailing on something for hours. PvP fights in this game don't last a super long time, especially on a Slayer fighter, and rarely are you able to just wail on somebody for, seconds and seconds on end. Usually there's a little bit of like going into combat range and backing up and re-engaging, things like that. Usually on a Slayer fighter, many classes die to 1 or 2 weapon combos, sometimes not even 1 weapon combo, like the first 2 swings on the Falchion.
Slap.
So I wanted to calculate the DPS of 1 combo attack from each weapon, and in some cases, both weapons. Speaking of which, in these tests I'm running the combo attack perk. I thought it was good to get a little extra damage on that 3rd swing for some of these weapons, but also the perk activates much earlier in a combo when you're using a dual wield combo. I wanted to see if that was effective. Turns out, in some cases,
it is.
Other than that, there are no other modifiers. Not wearing like any dex gear or any strength gear or anything. I go in with some vigor gear sometimes, but I wanted to make sure that the numbers were consistent across the board without any kind of modifiers. Speaking of consistency, I'm using white quality or common quality weapons throughout this video. I wanted to establish some kind of baseline where we can rely, that these are all relatively good comparisons. They're all on the same level, There is a point of variance here, and this goes for all the different quality tiers of weapons. Like some common quality weapons hit 1 point harder or 1 point less hard than other common quality weapons. I guess some common quality weapons are just better than other common quality weapons. Usually it just deviates the DPS by like a point or 2 here or there. And I point out when I'm using better quality commons versus the poorer quality commons. It's usually not a huge difference, but for faster swinging weapons, it is a big difference, and you'll see why. And when it comes to comparing the DPS on these weapons, we're looking for bigger differences in numbers, like 1 or 2 DPS difference between combos that last like, a few to several seconds isn't really a massive difference. But when it starts reaching 3-ish or more DPS in difference, you should start to raise an eyebrow. These numbers I'm referencing will make a lot of sense soon, I promise. But that's enough explanation. Let's get to the offhand that many of you are wondering about and are likely already using: the short sword. If there's one takeaway from this video, is that the short sword is amazing. All the rogues are probably pointing and laughing at us for jumping on the short sword train so late. That weapon has been bis for rogues for a while now, I feel like. It's super good and should be paired with all the viable main hands in the game. It's essentially the new offhand for Slayer fighters. So as you can see in this video, the short sword deals its combo in a pretty respectable amount of time, just a little over 2 seconds. That's pretty fast for a weapon. Usually weapons take a little bit longer, near 3 seconds, in some cases near 4 seconds. But this thing clocks in at around 70-ish DPS per second, which is pretty good. You'll see relative to the other weapons in this video that this is a good number. We want to be around 70-ish DPS. That's strong. That's very strong for a combo. And the short sword is fast enough to where you can pull off a second combo, I feel like, pretty realistically in a fight. And that combo with combo attack up the perk, you get around 74-ish DPS from when I was checking. This is also the better quality of the common short swords, the one that does 23 damage versus 22. Always try to get the higher damage weapons, obviously, but it's more imperative on faster swinging weapons like this. else. But what is there to say? You know, it's a fast swinging, amazing weapon. It benefits from the Slayer perk, the +5 flat damage added on, more than other slower swinging weapons. And I know damage isn't the only thing that matters when it comes to comparing these weapons. We gotta talk about things like reach, like armor penetration, the different animations of these weapons. Don't worry, I go over all that. Oh, I realize I haven't gone over this. Most of you already know this, but almost every weapon in the game has a portion of the weapon, here I'll show a few of them here, has a portion of the weapon where it deals 100% of its damage, but there are portions of the weapon that deal less than its damage. You know, if you're too close to somebody, usually is when a weapon will deal less damage because you're too close to the handle of it and it's a little awkward to hit people with it. So this is very important to get the most damage out of your weapons, is to make sure you're hitting people with the optimal part of the weapon, the sweet spot. Just pretend like you're playing Marth in Super Smash Brothers, you know?
Just hit him with the tip.
But honestly, the short sword is an amazing weapon. It gets a huge benefit from Slayer, has a good move set, fast swing speed, and also doesn't slow you down as much while you're swinging it, so you can stay on targets a little bit easier. I think the weakest points of the short sword are the fact that it gives you -10 move speed, which is unfortunate, but that's also pretty minor compared to other offhands and most weapons, honestly. I mean, yeah, it's no lantern, but you know, we gotta work with what we got. And sometimes the reach can feel a little short. I myself am still getting used to the move set, but I definitely feel the potential. It's really, really good. But yeah, considering all the other offhand options in the game, which there are not many, it is the clear winner. There might be one potential option, but I'll go over that later in the video. So now that we know that the short sword is so good, which main hands does it pair best with? Does a main hand even matter anymore since the short sword is so good on its own? Do you want to swing only the short sword, or do you want to swing the main hand in some situations? Do you ever want to alternate the attacks? Let's take a look. Oh, reliable. I don't think the arming sword has ever not been good, but how does it compare to the short sword? So once again, we're using the better quality common arming sword. Its combo takes a little bit longer to pull off, nearer to 3 seconds. And when we do the calculation, it's around 67-ish DPS, which isn't terrible. It's definitely lower than the short sword, but it's respectable. That's not too bad. It's effective. Other things to say in the arming sword's defense is that it has longer reach, obviously, and that's always good. It has very good reach. And its sweet spot is a little worse than the short sword, I believe, ratio-wise, but it's still not too horrible to play around. Honestly, it's not hard to get 100% damage out of each arming sword swing. You just gotta make sure you're hitting people with the end of the blade. So those are main hand attacks only with this combo. What if we try alternating the attacks? So this 5-hit combo obviously takes a little bit longer to pull off, just a little over 4 seconds. However, when we calculate the DPS of this initial flurry, we get 70.78, that's close to 71. And this is also with the worst quality common short sword, so the real number is actually closer to 72. That's pretty good. That's also better than just the short sword by itself. So seemingly the alternating combo attack is worth it with the arming and short sword. The only thing you want to consider when using this like alternating flurry attack is the different weapon reaches and the different sweet and sour spots of each weapon. You want to make sure you're hitting for 100% damage with each swing. But thankfully it's pretty manageable with these two weapons, as their sweet and sour spots and reaches aren't too terribly different. So from a damage perspective, the arming sword and short sword is a pretty good combo. You should use it. Everyone loves or hates the Falchion, whether you are wielding it or on the receiving end of its absolutely insane phantom reach. It's wild. Yeah, the damage seems crazy, but with Slayer fighters, you might be surprised. So this is using the higher damage common quality Falchion. Its 3-hit combo takes a little bit longer than most weapon combos to pull off, clocking in at near 3.5 seconds, which means its DPS is around 66. That was a lot lower than I was expecting. Why does that damage seem so low? That's lower than the short sword and the arming sword. From what I can figure out, it's 2 reasons. One, the Falchion has a very slow swing speed and doesn't benefit from the Slayer perk specifically as much as these faster swinging weapons. Like something that swings faster is going to get more out of the flat +5 damage added from the Slayer perk, because that +5 damage is added up more quickly, which is very good from a DPS perspective. And 2, the DPS suffers greatly from the Falchion's delay on the 3rd swing of the combo. The damage is front-loaded on the first 2 swings of the combo. You can see here that in 2 seconds you're dealing 142 damage, which is 71 damage per second. That's a little more respectable. The arming sword actually suffers from a similar issue where the first 2 swings have way higher DPS than the 3rd. I think it's something crazy like in the mid-70s to high 70s. I ran the numbers, but I don't have the footage.
I'm sorry.
But yeah, that 3rd swing in both of these combos actually brings down the DPS because of the weird delay, and it's also just not great on the arming sword because, you know, you have this weird stab you gotta aim way more accurately. But can we help the Falchion out a little bit here? What if we tried alternating the attacks with a short sword? So I tried a few different combos out, and the 4-hit combo where you swing the Falchion twice Mace and sneak in a short sword attack before the third swing of the Falchion's combo seem to yield the best results. You deal 276 damage in a little under 4 seconds. It's around 70 DPS, a little over 70 DPS. Oh, by the way, this is also done with the worst quality short sword, the one that does 1 less damage. So the real DPS is actually a little bit higher than this. It's interesting that sneaking in that one little short sword attack right before the third swing actually brings up the DPS a good bit. An interesting note, this is with the first 4 hits of this flurry. If you hold down both mouse buttons and you're just kind of letting the game do these dual wield attacks for you, it'll try to make a 5th hit with the short sword of this combo. And it actually brings down your DPS dramatically. It goes from like 70 to 66, 65-ish. So more testing is needed, but I think the ideal combo with the setup is if you swing the Falchion twice, 1 hit with the short sword, 3rd swing with the Falchion combo, and then you want to loop it again. Just start swinging at the Falchion again. That seems like it would yield more DPS. I'd have to see what the delay is like between the final swing of that 4-hit combo and then starting the Falchion loop again. But I do know that if you finish the 5-hit flurry with the short sword swing, it brings down your DPS. So try this 4-hit combo out and looping it and see if that feels good to you. So overall, it's kind of worth running with the short sword. The dual wield combo attack is totally viable, does a lot of damage. The reach of the Falchion, of course, is always insane. This is definitely one of the stronger combos. Just try to do what you can to avoid the DPS drop with that 3rd swing of the Falchion. Alright, so there's no doubt in my mind that this weapon has popped up on your radar at some point. So one of the obvious benefits from using the Flanged Mace is the 15% armor penetration, which is super useful in the current meta with all the PDR fighters running around. And this armor penetration does apply to your offhand, so this kind of makes it a viable choice if not just using it as a stat stick for your short sword. I mean, pumping up the short sword's already respectable damage with armor penetration is definitely strong. But let's take a look at the Flanged Mace's damage. So this is done with the higher damage version of the common quality Flanged Mace. It's a 3-hit combo, clocking in at just over 3 seconds, which equals around 68-ish, near 69 DPS. Very nice, which is a little bit more than the arming sword, surprisingly. But how does it perform with a short sword and alternating attacks? So this test was actually done with the lower damage version of the common Flanged Mace. The short sword Flanged Mace flurry is 5 hits in 4.5 seconds, a little over 4.5 seconds, which equals to around 69.96 DPS. Not bad at all. It's actually going to be higher if you use a higher quality Flanged Mace. I think it's closer to 71 actually, and that's pretty good damage. But I think one of the biggest drawbacks to the Flanged Mace is the sweet and sour spot ratio. You have to be at a very specific distance to get the full 100% damage from each swing of the Flanged Mace. And with how messy a lot of PvP fights get, it's unlikely that you're going to consistently be able to hit that sweet spot every time, you know? You also have to consider the difference in sweet and sour spots between the short sword and the Flanged Mace if you're going to do this dual wield combo. It's a little awkward because you have to kind of weave in and out a little bit when you're trying to get the full amount of damage per swing, just so you're hitting the sweet spot for each weapon. It's a little impractical. Overall though, the DPS from the Flanged Mace and from the dual wield flurry of the Flanged Mace and short sword is close enough to just the short sword itself. Just using the short sword is around 70 DPS. Just use that with the armor pen. That is a strong enough combo. Just using the short sword, taking advantage of the Flanged Mace's armor pen, and it does apply. I've tested this. Another penalty for the Flanged is that it's minus 25 move speed compared to the arming sword's minus 20. I think the Falchion is also minus 25, so getting into the minus 25 range feels a little bit worse than minus 20, obviously. And with the Lantern gone, you know, Slayer fighters are trying to shift things around to get as much move speed as possible, so that extra 5, you feel it, but it's workaroundable. But considering that, let's look at another offhand that might benefit from this armor pen. Dagger Slayer Fighter, what a meme, right? I gotta say though, these results surprised me. Take a look at this damage. So the Castillon is a much faster weapon. It's a 3-hit combo that clocks in a little over 2 seconds. The damage dealt in that time is 160, which equates to 71.64 DPS, which is higher than any other weapon on this list so far. This is obviously with the higher damage version of the common Castillon dagger, but I was very surprised at the damage here. You know, you don't have to take weapon mastery or anything to use it. I was actually completely unaware that this was a fighter native weapon. And another benefit is that it has no sour spot. If you're hitting somebody, you're hitting them for the full 100% damage, which makes sense considering its reach and like the size of the weapon. Something worth mentioning is that weapon damage makes a huge difference here. This is the better version of the common Castillon, as I said earlier, but even the difference in 1 damage to the worst quality Castillon brings its DPS down a whole 3 points. That is significant. So definitely grab the higher damage Castillons when you can if you're going to try this out. Again, the weapon damage scales super well with the swing speed of this, and which is why its DPS is being pumped up so much by Slayer. The flat +5 is doing work here. However, the biggest drawback of this offhand is the reach, as you would have guessed. You have to be pretty much up in somebody's face to even be hitting them with the thing. You also do not want to do the alternating flurry combo with this weapon, because usually what you're pairing it with has such a different reach and different sweet and sour spot ratio that it's very awkward to try and get like optimal damage. I tried running this with the Flanged Mace and it felt really good, but only if I'm using the Castillon or only if I'm using the Flanged Mace. Trying to do like a dual wield attack, the dual wield flurry with those two just does not work, because you have to keep stepping in and stepping back and stepping in to make sure you hit like the 100% mark with each weapon hitbox. It's just very awkward and it's not practical. And another potential con is that you have to make sure you land the third hit. Missing the third hit will just absolutely decimate your DPS. It's a little hard to land too. It's just like a stab, but landing that third stab is what makes that DPS jump from bad to good. There's one other upside I'd mention as well, is that like the short sword, the Castillon only has -10 move speed. I think it should have even less considering it's so much smaller than the short sword, but also when you're swinging away at people, it does not slow you down much at all. It feels really good to be able to move and attack at the same time. It's easy to stay on targets once you're on top of them. Honestly, I see potential. It felt pretty good to use, I gotta say. I want to test it some more, but I was actually 3-tapping certain classes just by getting all headshots with the Castillon. It's kind of insane the damage it does if you're able to land those headshots. The moveset takes a little getting used to if you don't use daggers very much, but it's honestly impressive. And maybe use the main hand in situations where you need a little more reach. Just don't ever do the alternating attack flurry because it will destroy your DPS. It's not good. Just run circles around people with the Castillon. Try to hit headshots and try to stay mobile if you're going to try this out. Give it a roll. I think you'll be surprised. All right, I know we just went over the Castillon, but let's move on to some even less popular choices.
Spoiler alert.
There's a reason they're less popular. So a few of you watching my streams were asking me to test this one, and I just took it upon myself to do it. Off the bat, I'm really not a huge fan of taking weapon mastery to subtract 3-ish damage from the rapier, so that Slayer's only giving +2 at that point. But let's try it anyway. So when testing the rapier, I tried different versions of the combo. I tried calculating the first 2 hits or the first 3 hits out of the evenly spaced 4 hits that occur across 3.5 seconds on the mark. Yeah, the DPS really just isn't there, unfortunately. It's significantly less than anything on the list so far, but we know that damage isn't everything. I mean, I would say a few things in the Rapier's defense. One, it has really good reach out of most of the one-handers here. It feels really good to be able to hit people with the end of the blade. You can definitely kind of weave in and out of fights a little easier if you're using the Rapier, though I don't think you're taking advantage of the combo attack perk at that point, but still it works with the whole stepping in and out of melee range playstyle. Pretty useful against a barbarian maybe. And 2, it has 0 sour spot. It's only a sweet spot, that whole blade, which is kind of cool. So no matter how close you are to the target, you're hitting for 100% damage, which is, reliable, I guess. Let's see how it pairs with the short sword. So when performing the dual wield flurry attack with the rapier and the short sword, you clock in 5 attacks in a little over 4 seconds. That damage totals up to 242. It's just 57 DPS. It's not too much, or near 58, I guess. Oh, and I also don't know if this is the worst quality common rapier or not, but honestly, a point of damage is not going to push this thing into competition with the other weapons on this list. Yeah, the damage just isn't there, and there's something that rubs me wrong about running Slayer to get +5 weapon damage and then taking away some of that damage with weapon mastery. It's definitely anti-synergistic, and I don't think you want to maim your damage that much. Oh boy, yeah, let's take a look at these. We'll start with the hatchet. All right, so the hatchet swings only. It's 3 hits over the course of almost 3 seconds, a little under 3 seconds. So 153 damage total over that time, and it equals 54-ish DPS. Yeah, so not only does this thing have a whopping -30 move speed, I'm not kidding, it also just has really pathetic damage on top of that. It also has one of the worst sweet and sour spot ratios of any weapon on this list so far, potentially the worst considering its lack of reach. Yeah guys, don't use this weapon. It's not even worth comboing with a main hand because its damage is just that low. Just don't. The only time you'd even consider this weapon is if you're doing like a base kit 0 to hero Slayer run, and you need an offhand to activate your Slayer and dual wield perks. Like, yeah, use it to get your perks online, but as soon as you find any other offhand,
toss it.
Another ass axe. It's not good. I mean, this suffers from the same problems the Hatchet does, honestly. Just really bad damage, really big move speed decrease. I think it's another -30. Not very good move set, not good animations, you know? This might actually have a worse sweet sour spot ratio than the Hatchet though, because I think the very tip of the weapon is actually considered a sour spot, which is kind of insane. Yeah, don't use this one either. I'd love for these one-handed axes to be good, you know? I think it'd be cool, kind of like how maces have 15% innate armor penetration, if they gave like a little something special to axes and even swords. You know, maybe axes have like extra limb damage. That'd be kind of cool. They're supposed to be good at chopping off limbs, right? I don't know, I think it'd be cool if they gave them some kind of unique perk like the extra limb damage or something. You know, obviously not enough to outweigh the damage of a headshot, but it'd be kind of cool if we had a weapon where it was viable to actually attack the limbs of somebody rather than just always going for headshots. I don't know, just an idea. But anyways, I'm getting off topic. Last weapon. Let's just take a look at this one. So the Viking Sword main hand combo is 3 hits over the course of almost 3.5 seconds. Feels a little slow to me, and I can't remember if this is the better quality common Viking Sword, but honestly, it doesn't matter because the DPS, once again, 57-ish, it's just not up there. It has like an okay sweet and sour spot ratio. I mean, the damage is like not great. The reach is okay. It's just very okay, which means you'll probably want to just use one of the options earlier in this video. I mean, I think that pretty much does it for all the viable weapons that a Slayer fighter would consider. Listen, play how you want. I'm not gonna say you shouldn't use a certain weapon. If you want to run around using, you know, 2 one-handed axes just because you think it's cool, go ahead. I just wanted to get some actual numbers down for the effectiveness of certain Slayer fighter weapons because, I guess I just wanted to know, instead of pretending I knew the effectiveness based purely on feeling. Personally, I've been really digging Arming Sword Short Sword and Flanged Mace Short Sword. I mean, I use the Falchion when I find it because the Falchion is just good, but I feel like I want to use the Short Sword more. The DPS is just so high and I want to kind of like buff that as much as I can. But also I've been messing around with the Castillon. I'm telling you should give it a try. Maybe it's a meme, but I don't know, man. The damage feels really good. I know Dark and Darker's in early access and a lot of these weapons are going to be subject to rebalancing and changes. So as those occur, I'll probably do an updated version of this video. But other than that, I think that's pretty much going to be it. I don't think I'm forgetting any viable options. Am I? Any other offhands, perhaps? Nah, I can't be. I don't think I am. Is there anything? No, I don't think so.